The land looked flattened, as if by a rolling pin, all aspects of all directions. On either side of Highway 62, the sand cast up visions of evaporated civilizations, dissolved castles that lay buried under the desert. Any human eye goggled by a car's windshield can graft such fantasies onto the great Mojave. The boy and girl in the Dodge Charger were exceptionally far-sighted. Mirages rose from the boulders, a flume of dream attached to real rock. And hadn't their trip unfolded like a fairy tale? The couple later quizzed, recalling the strange day, their first in California, hiking among the enormous apricot boulders of Joshua Tree National Park. The girl had got her period a week earlier and was feeling woozy. The boy kept bending over to remove a pebble from his shoe, a phantom that he had repeatedly failed to find. Neither disclosed these private discomforts. Each wanted the other to have the illusion that they might pause anywhere, at any moment, and make love. And while both thought this was highly unlikely, not in this heat, not at this hour, the possibility kept bubbling up every place they touched. This was the only true protection they'd brought with them as they walked deeper into the blue gold Mojave. On the day they arrived in Joshua Tree, it was 106 degrees. They had never been to the desert. The boy could scarcely believe the size of the boulders, clustered under the enormous sun like dead red rockets awaiting repair, or the span of the sky, a cheerfully vacant blue dome, the desert's hallucinatory geography achieved through stillness, brightness, darkness, distance, and all of its before the noon. It was a big day, they agreed. It was a day so huge, in fact, that its real scale would always elude them. Neither understood that a single hour in the desert could mutate their entire future as a couple. In a sense, they would never escape this trail loop near Black Rock Canyon. They had prepared for the hike well, they thought, with granola bars, water, and an anti-UV sunscreen so powerful its SPF seemed antagonistic. Albino spring break, the boy said, rubbing the cream onto her nose. They'd heard about the couple who had died of dehydration 6 miles from where they were standing. They congratulated themselves on being unusually responsible and believed themselves to be at the start of a long journey, weightless spores blowing west. The trip was kind of a honeymoon. The boy and girl were eloping. They weren't married, however, and had already agreed they would never be. They weren't that kind of couple. The boy, Andy, was a reader. He said that they were seafarers. Ever unfixed, a line from Melville, was scraped in red ink across the veins of his arm. The girl, Angie, was 3 years sober and still struggling to find her mooring on dry land. On their first date, they had decided to run away together. Andy bought a stupidly huge knife. Angie had a tiny magenta flashlight suspended on a gold chain, which she wore around her throat. He was 22. She was just turning 26. Kids were for later, maybe. They could still see their children they had been, their own popsicle red smiles haunting them. Still, they'd wanted to celebrate a beginning, and the Mojave was a good place to launch into exile together. Already they felt their past lives in Pennsylvania dissolving into rumor, sucked up by the hot sun of California and the perfectly blue solvent of the sky. They'd been driving for 3 days. Almost nobody knew yet they were gone. They'd cashed old checks, they'd quit their jobs. Nothing was planned. The rental Dodge Charger had been a real steal, because the boy's cousin Sewell was a manager at the 0 to 60 franchise. And because it smelled like decades of cigarettes, between them they had $950 left now. Less. At each rest stop, Angie uncapped the ballpoint, did some nauseating accounting. Everything was going pretty fast. By the time they reached Nevada, they had spent more than $800 on gasoline. Near Palm Springs, they stopped to eat at No Name Diner and nearly got sick from the shock of oxygen outside the stale sedan. The night before, just outside Albuquerque, they parked behind a barbecue restaurant and slept inside a cloud of meat smells. The experience still has the sizzle of a recent hell in Angie's memory. Will they do this every night? She wants to believe her boyfriend when he tells her they are gypsies. Two moths drunk on light, darting from the flower of one red sunset to the next. But several times she dozed off in the passenger seat and awakened from traitorous dreams of her old bedroom, soft pillows. After dinner, Andy drives drowsily, weaving slightly. Sand, sand, sand. All that pulverized time. Eons ago, the world's burst hourglass spilled its contents here. Now the years pile a spin, waiting with inhuman patience to be swept into some future ocean. Sand washes right up to the paved road, washes over to the other side in a solid orange current, illuminated by their headlights. Who lives way out like that? Angie says, pointing through the window at the line of trailer homes. Why is the implied question? 13-foot saguaro cacti looked enormous, roadside hitchhikers. Comical and menacing, Andy is drifting off, his hand on Angie's bare thigh, when a streak of color crosses the road. A parade of horned beasts, just sheep, Angie noted with relief. Andy watched each animal go from sheep to cloud in the side mirror, reduced immediately into memory. The radio blares songs about other humans doomed or lost loves, or their bombastic lusts in progress. Andy watches his girlfriend's red lips move, mouthing the lyrics to a song. Andy didn't realize he knew. My wife's lips, he thinks, and feels frightened by the onslaught of unexpected happiness. Were they serious coming out here? Were they kidding around? Are they getting more serious? Less, perhaps. They'll sort it all out at the next rest stop. The night, they stay in $54 motel. By dawn, they are back on the highway. They don't try to account for their urgency to be gone. Both feel it. Neither can resist it. At 10 a.m., Angie lifts her arm to point at the western sky. There's a pale rainbow arcing over the desert. It looks as if God had made a bad laundry error, mixed his colors with whites. How could even the rainbow be faded, she wonders. The sign reads, Entering Joshua Tree National Park. Quietly they rolled under the substantial archway of the rainbow, and Andy slowly the charger. He wants to record the transition, which feels important. Usually you can only catch the Sasquatch blur of your own legendary moments in the side mirrors. More and more slowly they drive into the park. Sand burns outside their windows in every direction. Compass needles spin in their twinned minds. Everywhere they look, they are greeted by horizon, deep gulps of blue. People think of their green pastoral when they think of lovers in nature. Those English poets used the vales and streams to douse their lusts into verse. But the desert offers something that no forest book or valley can. Distance. A cloudless rooming house for couples, skies that will host any victor's dreams with the bald hospitality of pure space. In terms of an ecology that can support two lovers in hot pursuit of each other, this is the place. Everywhere you look, you'll find monuments to fevered longing. Craters beg for rain all year long. Moths hunt the succulents, winging sticky pollen from flower to flower. Near the campground entrance, they are met by a blue-eyed man of indeterminate age, a park employee who comes lunging out of their infernal brightness with whiskery urgency. His feet are so huge that he looks like a jackrabbit even in the boots. "Where did you folks wash up from?" he asks. Their answer elicits a grunt. "First-timers to the park." The boy explains that they're on their honeymoon, watches the girl redden with pleasure. Up close, the ranger has the unnervingly direct gaze and polished bright-glowing skin of so many undoorsmen. A large bee lifts off a cactus, walks the rim of his hat, and he doesn't flick it off. A show of tolerance that is surely for their benefit. Do Warren Peak, go see the Joshua trees, watch the yucca moths do their magic. You're in luck. You've come smack in the middle of a pulse event. As far as we can tell, the entire range of Joshuas is in bloom right now. You think you're in love? The moths are smitten in all my ears. I've seen nothing to rival it. It's a goddamn orgy in the canyon. It turns out that their visit has coincided with the tremendous blossoming, one that is occurring all over the southwest. Highly erotic, the ranger says, with his creepy bachelor smile. A record number of greenish-white flowers have erupted out of the Joshua. Pineapple huge, the crown of every bunch. Now there's an education for a couple, huh? Charles Darwin agrees with me, says it's the most remarkable pollination system in nature. There's no romance more dire than pure than of the desert moth in Joshua. Dire? The girl asks, and learns from the ranger that Joshua trees may be on the brink of extinction. Botanists believe they're witnessing a coordinating response to crisis. Perhaps a drought legible in the plant's perhaps leaves has resulted in this push. Seeds in abundance, their ancient species hail merry paths. Yucca moths, attracted by the flower's penetrating odor, are their heroic spouses, equally dependent, equally endangered. Their level children feast on the yucca seeds. It's an obligate relationship. Each species' future depends entirely on the other, the ranger says, and then grins hugely at them. The boy is thinking that the math sounds about right. 2 species, 1 fate. The girl wonders at their own elopement. Who is more dependent on whom? What toast might Charles Darwin make when they will break their first vows and get married? So they obey the ranger, drive the charger another quarter-mile, park the deserted base of Warren Peak. Angie says she has to pee, and Andy sits on the hood and watches her. They set off along the trail which begins to ascend the ridgeline east of Warren Peak. Now Joshua woodland sprawls around them. This is where the bad graft occurs. For the rest of her life, she will be driven to return to the park, searching for the origin of the feeling that chooses this day to invade her and make it its home under her skin. Before starting the ascent, each pauses to admire the plant that is the park's namesake. The Joshua trees look hilariously alien, like Satan's telephone poles. They are primitive, irregularly limbered, their branches swooning up and down, sparsely covered with syringe-thin leaves. More like spines, Angie notes. Some mature trees have held their insane poses for thousands of years. They look as if they were on drugs and hallucinating themselves. The ranger told them the plant was named the 19th century by a caravan of Mormons, passing through what they perceived to be a wasteland. They saw a forest of hands, which recalled to them the prayers of the prophet Joshua, but the girl can't see the plants as any kind of holy augury. She's thinking Dr. Seuss, Timothy Leary. See the moths, Angie? No. Wonder they call it a pulse event. Wings are beating everywhere. Unfortunately for Angie, the ranger they encountered had zero information to share on the ghostly leap, so he could not warn her about the real danger posed to humans by the pulsating Joshuas. Between February and April, the yucca moths arrive like living winds swirling throughout Black Rock Canyon. Blossoms detonate, pollen heaves up, then Joshua tree sheds a fantastic sum of itself. Angie feels dizzy, As she leans out to steady herself against a nearby Joshua tree, her finger is pricked by something sharp. One of the plant's dagger-like spines, bewildered. She stares at the spot of red on her finger. Running blood looks exotic next to the elysiated grasses. Angie Ganzels, wild child from Nestor, Pennsylvania, pricks her finger on a desert dagger and becomes an entirely new creature. When the leap occurs, Angie does not register any change whatsoever, so has no idea what has added its store of life to hers. But other creatures of the desert do seem to apprehend what is happening through the crosshairs of its huge pupils. A tarantula watches Angie's skin drink in the danger. The pollen from the Joshua mixes with her red blood on her finger. On the fuchsia ledge of the limestone, a dozen lizards witness the leap. They shut their gluey eyes as one, sealing their loosened bodies from contagion, inter-kingdom corruption. During a season of the wild ferment, a kind of atmospheric accident can occur. The extraordinary moisture stored in the mind of a passing animal or hiker can compel the spirit of a Joshua to leap through its own membranes. The change is metaphysical. The tree's spirit is absorbed into the migrating consciousness, where it lives on, intertwined with its host. Instincts guides its passage now, through the engulfing darkness of Angie's mind, programmed with the urgent need to plug itself into some earth. The plant's spirit goes searching for terra firma. Andy unzips his backpack, produces Fiji water and a Snoopy Band-Aid. "Your nose got burned," he says, and smiles at her. And at this juncture, she smiles back. He kisses the nose. "Come on, let's get out of here." Then something explodes behind her eyelids into a radial green fan, dazzling her with pain. Her neck aches, her abdomen. The pain moves lower. It feels as if an umbrella were opening below her navel. Menstrual cramps, she thinks, seconds later, as with a soldering iron. An acute and narrowly focused heat climbs her spine. At first, the Joshua tree elated to discover that it's alive. "I survived my leap. I was not inhabilitated whatsoever." Grafted to the girl's consciousness, the plant becomes aware of itself. It dreams its green way up into her eye stalks, peers out. Standing there in the mirror of the desert, 100 versions of itself. Here is its sixth home, fibrous and fruiting obscenely under a noon sun. Here is the locust that recently contained this tree spirit. For a tree, this is a dreadful experience. Its uprooted awareness floats throughout the alien form. It concentrates itself behind Angie's eyeballs, where there's moisture. This insoluble spirit, this refugee from the Joshua tree, understands itself to have leapt into hell, the wrong place, the wrong vessel. It pulses outward in a fuzzy frenzy of investigation, flares greener, sends out fillers, compared with the warm, expensive desert soil. The human body is cul-de-sac. This newborn ghost has only just begun to apprehend itself when its fragile tenacity is threatened. Angie sneezes, rubs at her temple, unaware that this is an immunological reflex. She's convulsed by waves of nostalgia for earlier selves, remote homes. Here, for some reason, is her childhood backyard, filled with anarchic wildflowers and bordered by Pennsylvania hemlock. Then the pain dismantles the memory. She holds her head in her hand, cries for Andy. "This is the plant fighting back," the girl moans. "Andy, you don't have any medicine? Advil or something?" The vegetable invader feels the horror of its imprisonment. Its new host is walking away from the Joshua tree forest, following Andy. What can this kind of survival mean? Although they don't know it, escape is now impossible for our vagabonding couple. Andy opens the sedan door. Angie climbs in it, and in the side mirrors the hundreds of other Joshuas shrink away into hobgoblins' shapes. Angie, you got so quiet. It's the sun. My head is killing me, honey. Dispersed throughout her consciousness. The tree begins to grow. Andy has no clue that he is now party to a love triangle. What he perceives is this girlfriend is acting very strangely. Do you need some water? Wanna sit and rest a while? At the motel, the girl makes straight for the bathroom faucet. She washes down the water with more water. Doesn't want to eat dinner. When Andy tries to undress her, she fights him off. Her movements seem to him balletic, unusually nimble, yet walking across the room, she pauses at the oddest moments. That night she basks in the glow of their TV as if it were the sun. Yellow is such a relief. I hate this show, the boy says, staring not at the motel TV but at her. Let's turn it off. Who are you? Does not bother to ask. Calmly, he becomes aware that the girl he loves has excited the room. Usually when this sensation comes over him, it means she's fallen asleep. Tonight she's sitting up in bed, eyes bright, very wide awake. Her eyes in the most lightning are hazel. Tonight they are the brightest green, as if great doors had been flung open onto an empty electrical lit room. The Joshua tree thinks in covert bursts of activity. The headache. She calls the odd pressure at first. The green headache. Psychosis at 4 a.m. when its power over her crests and she lies awake terrified. Torpor or sluggishness when it ebbs. Had you told her the invader is sinking its roots throughout you, tethering itself to you with 1,000 spectral feelers? Who knows what she would have done? The next day they wake at dawn as per their original plan to start every day at sun up and navigate by the whim. They go north on 247 with vague plans to stop in Barstow for gas. The girl's eyes are aching. Partway across Morongo Basin, she starts to cry so hard that the boy is forced to pull over. I'll work. They're hiring everywhere in town. Did you notice that? A job sounds unaccountably blissful to the girl, drinking water in the afternoon, sitting at a desk. The boy scowls down at his arm, flipped outwards against the steering wheel. The crumbled truth, the boy imagined that he'd be the one to betray the girl. Had they continued just a short distance northwest of Yucca Valley, they would have reached the on-ramp to I-15 North, and beyond that, the pinball magic of the tool booths, that multiverse of possible futures connected by America's interstate system. For the next 2 hours, they fight inside the car. Round clusters of leaves shake loose in front of her eyes, greeny white blossoms if she could only show him the desert in her imagination. Angie thinks the way she sees it. When it becomes clear that she's not joking, the boy turns the car around, calls cousin Sewell in Pennsylvania, explains their situation. "We're gonna stay a while," he says. "We like it here." Sewell needs to know how long. They'll have to put the car in some conveyance, get it back to Pennsylvania. "Indefinitely," the boy hears himself say. Her word for what she claims she wants. They decide to pay the weekly rate at the motel. They go for walks, they go for drives. Her favorite thing seems to be sitting in a dry wreck of turquoise jacuzzi they discover on the edge of the town. Some luckless homesteader abandoned pleasure tub, and he likes this too. Actually sitting in the tub, he finds it easy to pretend that they aren't trapped in a tourist town, that they aren't sailing toward an elsewhere, and he loves what happens to her face right at the sunset over the infinite desert. Moonlight, however, affects her in a way that he finds indescribably frightening. The change is in the eyes, he thinks. 2 weeks later, in late April, their money runs out. They've spent their days outside, Angie doing stretches in the motel courtyard, Andy reading his stolen library books from the back east, waiting for the bad enchantment to break. Andy tells Angie he's leaving her. They have no vehicle, the rental Dodge having been chauffeured east by a genial grifter pal of Sewell's. Angie nods, staring out the window of their room as the rain sweeps over the desert. All the muddy colors of the sky touch the earth. "Did you hear me? I said I'm leaving, Angie." That afternoon, Andy gets a job at the Joshua Tree Salon. Then there's a period of peace, coinciding with the Joshua Tree's dormancy inside of Angie, which lasts from April to mid-May. In the park, the Joshua's blossoms have all dropped off, leaving dried stalks. Andy does not even suggest moving on anymore. So thrilled he is to laugh with Angie again. He comes home with green fistful of tourist cash, reeking of Fireball and Pine Sol. He thinks, oh thank God, we're getting back to normal. Then one day after a spectacular freak thunder show, Angie tells him that he needs to go home or away, elsewhere, a bedroom other than the motel. She feels terrible. She doesn't know what she is saying. "Get me out of it." The plant keeps throbbing like a muscle in Angie's mind. A rustling sound in her inner ear, the plant's footsteps. A throaty appetite makes her imagine stuffing herself with hot mouthfuls of desert sand. Once Andy leaves her, she'll have a chance to inspect her interior figure, out what's gone haywire. "Let's go to Reno," Andy says. He feels quite desperate now, spinning the radio dial through seas of static. His great success this week at work wasn't formalizing. Via generous pours of straight gin, a new friendship with Jerry and the mailman who has given him access to his boxy truck. "Go to Reno, win big. I'll be right here. I don't want to leave the desert." Why doesn't she? The girl growls hysterical whenever Andy drives toward the freeway that might carry them away from the Mojave. She feels best when they're close to Warren Peak and Black Rock Canyon campground. For the next 2 weeks, she keeps encouraging Andy to leave her. Sometimes she feels a lump in her throat that she can't swallow, and it's easy to pretend that this is a vestige of who she used to be. Her Pennsylvania history now compacted into a hard ball she cannot access or dissolve. For Andy's sake, she wishes she could be that girl again. Dimly, she is aware that she used to crave travel, adventure. She can remember the pressure of Andy's legs tangled around her, but not what she held in her mind. The world has grown unwieldy. And there are days now when the only thing that appeals to her is pulling up her t-shirt and going belly flat on the burning pink sand before the motel walkaway. One night, Angie turns to face the wall. Golf ball-sized orange and yellow flowers pattern their wallpaper, plus water stains from ancient leaks. She's never noticed this before under the influence of the Joshua. She sees the water in stains as beautiful, is more interesting than the TV. "What do you see?" she asks the boy. "I'm not in the mood," he says, having at least been granted the opportunity to have a mood. After days and hours spent trying to rekindle her appetite for pleasure, for danger, he realizes that he has cut all ties for her, that he has nothing. He wants to return to Pennsylvania. It's a liberating, terrifying feeling. If she leaves him, if he leaves her, what then? Now the plan is catching on to something. On its 3 months of incubation, it grows exponentially in its capacity for thought. Gradually the plant learns to think blue, to smell rain through her nose. Unfurling its languorous intelligence, it looks out through her eyes, hunting for meaning the way it used to seek out deep sun, Jade do, hunting now for the means of imagining its own life, comprehending what it has become inside the girl. The Joshua tree discovers that it loves church, plugging one's knees into the purple risers, lifting to enter a song, the apple-red agony painted onto the cheeks of the swallow man. All the light that fills the church drifts dreamingly over the Joshua tree, which stretches to its fullest extension inside the girl during the slow crawling time for the service. It approves of this place, which resembles a massive seed hull, deeply exasperating from its forays into the earth. It understands the architecture and impulse, craving stillness. These humans have evolved this stronghold. How was it? Andy asks. Picking her up, he refused to go with her. Sundays are his day off. Delicious God bread, lots of songs. It was nice. What are you so jealous about? Her head bobs on the long stem of her neck, as if they were agreeing on a fascinating point. I can still get out of this, he thinks. Without understanding exactly how the trap got sprung, he can feel its teeth in him. You should come in next time, she offers. You'd like the windows. Sometimes to earn extra money, she watches kids who are staying at the motel. $6 an hour, $4 for each additional kid. She's good at it, mostly. Timmy Babson hates the babysitter. Sometimes her eyes are dull, friendly, brown, and as kind as his sister's. Sometimes they're twin vacuums. This is already pretty scary, but tonight when he looks over, he sees the bad light flooding into them. Not yellow, not green. An older color, which Timmy recognizes on sight but cannot name. And this is much worse. His own eyes prickle wetly. His blonde hair darkens with sweat. Pearls of water stand out on his mouth. The longer he stares back, the wider the gaze seems to get, like a grin. Her eyes radiate hard spines of heat, which drill into him. Timmy Babson feels punctured. Jane? Timmy screams for his mother, calling her by the first name for the first time. On her good days, Angie tries to battle the invader. She thinks she's fighting against lethargy. She does jumping jacks in the motel courtyard, calls her best friend Ingenue from the motel payphone, and anxiously tries to reminisce about their shitty high school band. They sing an old song together and she feels almost normal. But increasingly she finds herself powerless to resist the warmth that spreads through her chest. The midday paralysis. The hunger for something slow and deep and unnameable. Some maid has drawn the blackout curtains. One light bulb dangles. The dark reminds Angie of packed earth, moisture. What she interprets as sprawling emotion in the Joshua tree. Here was its birth in the sands of Black Rock Canyon. Here was its death and its rebirth as a ghostly presence in the human. Couldn't it perhaps leap back into that older organism? The light bulb pulses in time with Angie's headache. It acquires a fetal glow otherworldly. Her heels grind uselessly into the carpet, her toes curl at the fibers. She stands in the quiet womb of the room, waiting for a signal from the root brain, the ancient network from which the invader has been exiled. She lifts her arms until they are fully extended, her fingers turned outwards, her ears pricked up like sharp leaves, alert for moisture. She's still standing like that when Andy comes home with groceries at 10 p.m., her palms facing the droning light bulb, so perfectly still that he yelps when he spots her. How old such stories must be. Legend of a bad romance between wandering humans and plants. How often these bad grafts must occur, and few people ever the wiser. In 1852, the Mormon settlers who gave the Joshua tree its name reported every variety of disturbance among their party after hikers through the sparse and fragrant forest of Death Valley. One elder sat on a rock at the forest's edge and refused to move. 1873, in the lawless town of Pennant, Darwin in 1874, Modic in 1875. During the silver boom, dozens of miners went missing. Many leapt to their deaths down the shafts. The silver rush coincidentally with a pulse event. The trees blossomed unstoppably, wept pollen, and they leapt, eclipsing their minds of these poor humans who stood no chance against the vegetable's ancient spirit. Dying is one symptom of a bad graft. The invasive species coiled green around the silver miners' brains. 1879, all towns abandoned. Sorted ore sat in the wheelbarrows above ground, winking emptily at the nearby Joshuas. In 1922, in what is now the southern region of the park, near the abandoned iron mines of Eagle Mountain, a man was killed by the human host of Joshua Tree. It was no difficult to find the murderer, since a girl was huddled a few feet from the warm body, sobbing quietly. A crime of passion, the young officer tended to take a romantic view of the motives, murmured. The grizzled elder on the call with him had less to say about what drove anyone to do anything. All the girl could remember was the terrible, irremediable tension between wanting to be somewhere and wanting to be nowhere. And the plant, crazed by its proximity to the rich, familiar soil, tried repeatedly to leap out of her. This caused her hand to lift, holding a long knife, and plummet earthward. Rooting into the fleshy chest of her lover, feeling deeper and deeper for moisture, the Joshua's Tree's greatest victory over the couples come 4 months into their stay. They sign a lease, a bungalow on the outskirts of the national park with a fence to keep out the coyotes and outdoor shower. When the shower water gets into their mouths, it tastes like poison. Strange reptiles hug the fence posts like colorful olives and toothpicks. Andy squeezes Angie's hand and returns the gaze of these tiny monsters. He feels strangely bashful as they bugle their throats at him. 4 months into his desert sojourn, and he doesn't know the name of anything. The bungalow looks a lot like a shed. The bloated vowels of his signature on this landlord's paper make him think of a large hand blurring underwater. 3 Joshua trees grow right in their new backyard. Rent before utilities is $400. We can't afford this, he tells the girl, speaking less to her than to the quiet trees, wanting some court stenographer in the large cosmos to record his protest. The landlord, who is a native of Yucca Valley, is taking the young couple throughout the calendar. His name is Desert John, and he offers these Eastern kids what he calls Desert John's survival tips. With laconic glee, he advises Andy to cut back the chaparral in their backyard to waist height in summer. To avoid the minimal danger of baby rattlesnakes, he tells Angie to hydrate, especially if she's trying to get pregnant. With polite horror, the couple nod along to stories of their predecessors, former tenants who collapsed from heat exhaustion, were bitten by every kind of snake and spider. Average annual rainfall 5 inches, 8-degree nights in December, 112-degree July days. Andy is thinking of Angie's face on the motel pillow. He calculates they've slept together maybe 14 times in 4 months. In terms of survival strategies in a country hostile to growth, these desert plants, so ostentatiously alive in the Mojave, have got 0 on Andy. He's taking Angie to Pappy and Harriet's Pioneer Town Palace, a frontier-themed dance hall frequented by bikers and artists and other jolly modern species of degenerates. It's only 6 miles northcast of their new home and burns like a Roman candle against the immensity of the Mojave. Through surveying expeditions made in Jerry's truck, Andy has delimited the boundary lines of Andrew's tolerance. Once they move beyond a certain radius, she says that her head feels green and her bones begin to ache. Pain holds her here. That's their shared impression. So when Andy parks the truck, they are both relieved to discover that she's smiling. The Joshua tree discovers that it loves to dance, better even than church is the soft glow of hexagonal dance floor. Swung around in strangers' arms, Andy and Angie let themselves dance until they're sick at the edge of the universe. Andy lets Angie buy him 3 shots of rum. A weather seizes them and blows them around. A weather you can order for $1 the jukebox song. It's a good night outside the dance hall. The parking lot is full of cars and trucks, empty of humans. The wind pushes into them as hot as the blasts of air from a hand dryer. Angie draws Andy's attention to the clear-up cup of the moon. It looks red, she says. And it does. Sitting on a stranger's fender listening to the dying strains of a pop song they both despise, Andy asks her softly, "What's changed, Angie?" A question they like better because at least its tense sounds more hopeful. The Joshua tree leaves out in her mind. Heat blankets her. For a moment she's sure she will faint. Her vision clears. Bombuelo plays inside the dance hall through the illuminated squares of its windows. They can see the waving wheat of dancers' upper bodies, mouths gape in angry shock behind the frosted glass. They're only singing along to the music, Angie knows. Outside, the boy presses his mouth against hers. Now he is pressing every part of himself against the girl. Inside her, his competitor presses back. In the end, the 3 of them settle on a compromise. They dance in the empty parking lot under the stars that shoot eastwards like lateral rain. For a second, Joshua Tree can feel its grip on the host weakening. The present returns its existence. The couple's roaring happiness might dislodge the ghostly tree. So it renews its purchase on the girl, roots into her memory. Remember our first day, Andy? The hike through the Joshua tree. Compared with that, Angie thinks, what is there for us in the present? We are apt to label this phenomenon. It is the success of invading plant, which seeks only to anchor itself in the past. Why move forward? Why move at all? Andy spreads out the blanket. A soft aura surrounds the low moon as if the moon itself were dreaming. The red halo reminds him of a miner's carbide lantern. At first, when the girl suggested that they drive out the park, he felt annoyed, then scared. The light was in her eyes again, eclipsing the girl. She'd only been here seconds earlier, but only once he'd yielded to her plan. The night had organized itself into a series of surprises, the first of which was his own sharp joy. Now he finds his thrilled to be back inside the Black Rock Canyon campground. It is her idea to retrace the steps of their first hike to Warren Peak. For our anniversary, she says coolly. Although this rationale rings hollow, reminds Andy of his own bullshit justifications for taking out a lease on a desert bungalow. He does not guess the truth, of course, which is that slyly the Joshua tree is proliferating inside Angie, each of its 6 arms forking and flowering throughout her in the densest multiplication of desire. For months it has been trying to drive the couple back to this spot. Its vast root brains await it, 40 feet below the soil. Angie has no difficulty navigating down the park path. The little flashlight around her neck is bouncing like a leashed green sun. Her smile when she turns to find Andy is so huge that he wonders if he wasn't the one to suggest this night hike to her. Sometimes unexpected happens. For all of them, they re-enter the romance of past. When they reach the water tank, which is 200 yards from the site of the leap, Angie asks Andy to shake out of the blanket. She sucks on the finger she pricked. Around the blanket, tree branches divide and braid. They look mutinous in their stillness. Andy can see the movie scene, Bruce Willis attacking an army of Joshuas. He's imagining this. The trees swimming across the land like sand octopuses, flailing their spectic arms when the girl catches his wrist in her fingers. When didn't they? Andy wonders. Back then, the first time they walked this loop, they were preparing to do plenty. Andy unzips his jeans, shakes the caked black denim off like solid dust. Angie wearing a dress, their naked legs tangled together in a pale, fleshy echo of static contortionists that surround their blanket. Now the Joshua tree loves her. It grows and it flowers. Angie will later wonder how exactly she came to be possession of Andy's knife. Its bare blade holds the red moon inside it. She watches it glimmer there, poised above Andy's shoulder. The ground underneath the blanket seems to undulate. The fabric of the desert is wrinkling and flowing all around them. Even the Joshua trees, sham dead, now begin to move, or so it seems to the girl, whose blinded eyes are stuttering. The boy's mouth is at the hollow of the girl's throat, then lower. She moans as the invader's leaves and roots go spearing through her, and still he's unaware that he's in danger. Angie can no longer see what she's doing. Her eyes are shut, her thoughts have stopped. One small hand rests on Andy's neck and the other fist withdraws until the knife points earthward. Down, down, the invader demands. Something sighs sharply, and it might be Andy, or it might be the entire forest. Leap, leap, the Joshua implores. What saves the boy is such a simple thing. Andy props himself up on an elbow, pausing, steady his breath. He missed the moment when she slid the knife from the crumpled heap of his clothing. He has no idea that its blade is sparking inches from his neck. Staring Angie's waxy, serious face, he's overcome by a flood of memories. "Hey, Angie," he asks, stroking the fine dark hairs along her arm. "Remember how we met?" One of the extraordinary adaptive powers of our species is its ability to transmute a stray encounter into a first chapter. Andy has never had sticking power. She dropped out of high school. She walked out of the GED exam. Her longest relationship prior to falling for Andy was 7 months. But then they'd met, and something in her character was spontaneously altered. He remembers the song that was playing. He remembers ordering another round he could not afford, a freezing yodeling for himself, ginger ale for her. They were sitting on the same wooden stools, battered tripods that had supported the plans and commitments of the young in that town for generations. The Joshua tree flexes its roots. Desperately it tries to fix its life to her life. In the human mind, a Joshua spirit can be destroyed by the wind and radiation fluxes of memory, casting its spectral roots around. The plant furiously redens with a very human feeling, humiliation. What a thing to be undone by. Golden hopes and ginger root, the clay shales of Pennsylvania. It loses its grip on her arm. The strength runs out of her tensed biceps. The girl's fingers loosen, the knife falls, unnoticed to the sand. The green invader is displaced by the swelling heat of the earliest happiness, banished to the outermost reaches of Angie's consciousness. The Joshua tree now hovers in agony, half forgotten, half dissolving, losing its purchase on her awareness and so on its own reality. What a perfect night, the couple agree. Angie stands and brushes sand from her skirt. Andy frowns at the knife, picks it up. "Happy anniversary," he says. It's not their anniversary, but doesn't it make sense for them to celebrate the beginning here? This desert marked the point in space where they'd both wanted the same future. What they're nostalgic for is the old plan, the first one, their antique horizon. Down their rail, and down through time, the couple walk back toward the campground parking lot, making plans again, each of them babbling excitedly over the other. Maybe Reno, maybe Janelle. Andy jogs ahead to their loaner getaway vehicle. The Black Rock Canyon campground is one of the few places in the park where visitors can sleep amid the Joshua trees, soaking up the starlight from those complex crystals that have formed over millennia in the desert sky. Few of these campers are still outside their tents and RVs, but there's one familiar silhouette. It's the ranger, who is warming his enormous feet, bony and perfectly white, by the fire pit. Shag covers the 5-foot cactus behind him, which makes it look like a giant's mummified thumb. "You love birds again," he crows, waving them over. Reluctantly, Andy doubles back. Angie is pleased and frightened that he remembers them. For a few surreal minutes, standing before the leaping flames, they talk about the hike, the moths, the Joshua woodland. Andy is itching to be gone. Already he is imagining giving notice at the salon, packing up their house, getting back on the endlessly branching estate. But Angie is curious. Andy is a little embarrassed, in fact, by the urgent tone of her questions. She wants to hear more about the marriage of the yucca moth and the Joshua. Is theirs a doomed romance? Can't the two species untwine, separate from their fortunes? Andy leaves to get their truck. And the Pulse event. Have the moths all flown? Will the Joshua tree die out? Go extinct in the park? A key turns in the ignition at the entrance of Black Rock Canyon, and Andy leaps forward against the wheel. Squinting through the windshield, he's waiting for the girl to emerge from the shadows, certain that she will do so, and then a little less sure. "Oh, it's a hardy species," the ranger says. His whiskers are clear tubes that hold the red firelight. "Those roots go deep. I wouldn't count a tree like that out."